All right, welcome back to the Copywriters Podcast with your host, the world's greatest copywriting coach, David Garfinkel. David, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Nathan. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We've got a kind of a continuation from a previous episode, and I'm stoked to get into what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, you're right. A little over a month ago, we did a last minute podcast about an audacious experiment. Our special guest today, Nick O'Connor, did with Glenn Fisher and the financial publishing giant Marketwise. On that podcast, Glenn told us how they put together a special program called Financial Copy U, which would train 12 copywriters absolutely free on how to write copy for financial publishers, with the understanding that some graduates might be offered full-fledged copywriting jobs right after they graduated, depending on, of course, how they did in the training. Now that Financial Copy U is in full swing, we asked Nick, Glenn's partner, to more. Tell us more about what he and Glenn are doing right now, seeing as there's not enough other solid training for financial copywriting going on, at least as I know. I realize Nick has a lot of valuable information for us. Among his many impressive accomplishments, Nick was head of copy and publisher for Agora's financial imprint in the UK, South Bank Investment Research. Today, as well as co founding The Fix, he writes for financial publishers in the UK, US, and Australia, and consults with Agora companies around the world. So before we dive in, let me give you a friendly reminder. Copy is powerful. You're responsible for how you use what you hear on this podcast, and most of the time, common sense is all you need. But if you make extreme claims, and or if you're writing copy in highly regulated industries like health, finance, and business opportunity, you may want to get a legal review after you write and before you start using your copy. My larger clients do this all the time. So, Nick, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely introduction. I like to think of myself as Glenn's sort of funnier and better looking business partner. That's how I think of myself anyway. I don't know how he thinks of me.
Well, good. Here's a chance to put that to the test today. Um, I'm not going to comment on looks because that's out of my lane. But all right, let's talk about what you guys are doing with MarketWise. What is FSU? What is FCU? I'm sorry. What is FCU?
So, I mean, you did a pretty good job there of summarizing it, probably far better than I'll do because I'll probably ramble on. But effectively, it's a way of us finding the next generation of financial copywriting talent. On behalf of Marketwise. I mean, that was the mission we were given by the Marketwise business. So as a small aside, I write for Marketwise in my they're my main client in my day-to-day writing duties. Yeah, they came to me and said, we want to start building our copy team. We want to find talent, but it's extremely difficult to do that. And so we came up with the slightly grandiose and slightly mad plan of training a bunch of people for 12 weeks and then seeing who was ready to get a job and, in Marketwise business. So it comes from a desire to recruit primarily, but obviously there are some other benefits to people, to the writers who've joined us on the course.
Yeah. So, Nick, it's interesting. MarketWise approached you, and um, I'd like to talk about that a little bit. Not just MarketWise, which is a great company, but the whole industry in general. Maybe not even just financial copywriting, but you know, larger companies that are direct response. There's so much. Okay, I don't think there's a lot of other good financial training out there that I know of. Few things, but not a lot. But there's a lot of books. I mean, when I started, there were a handful of books. There are hundreds of them now. There's some good ones. There's some good courses. There are other mentors. There are groups, and yet I I hear the same thing all the time. We can't find good copywriters. Why is that?
it's a very strange paradox, actually, that the industry is chronically short of copywriters, and there are always a lot of people who want to become a copywriter, which feels like a situation that should resolve itself. Like, the demand of people who want to get into the industry is very, very high, and the desire for copywriters is extremely high, and yet there's a chronic shortage. I think there's lots of reasons for it. I think one is obvious. Financial copywriting is particularly specialized. It's got its own flavor and smell to it as an industry. So while it's a sort of subset of direct response copywriting, it's fairly distinct in terms of the way it works. It's fairly specialized. So maybe it's hard for people to learn those DR based, and then apply them across. That would be the positive side. I'd say the negative side, I think there's quite a lot of bad advice out there. Maybe not bad, but very shallow advice that actually, I come across lots of people who've been around the industry for a while, and they're trying to learn, and they're trying to observe how things work. And often, to train those people, you have to detrain them first. You have to say, no, everything you've been told about this is wrong, or everything you've taken from our industry is wrong. Whether it's an obsession with marketing gimmicks, or just crazy big claims, or just kind of crazy ideas, rather than, what we're looking for, which is like big, compelling ideas told in a really bold but credible fashion. So I think it's actually there's a lot of things, and we could probably do a "What's Wrong with Our Industry" podcast all of its own, and talk for a long time before we ever got to FCU and that whole side of things, because there's a lot of different issues all bound up in your question, really.
I think the reason that FCU is so important and came into existence is a lot of people don't understand what copywriting is. I mean,
Yeah.
It would be like a screenwriter watching some movies and think, oh, I just need to have some disgruntled guys from Afghanistan or Iraq, and there needs to be a lot of car crashes and chases and some money and an international threat, a nuclear threat or an internet threat. And I can just sort of throw that together and someone in Hollywood's going to buy it. And no, there's a lot more to it, but
Yeah.
it's not on the surface. People don't see that, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean by a shallow way of thinking about what we do. When I mentioned gimmicks and things like that, those are exactly that's exactly the comparison I would make. Yeah, a car chase. That's what makes a great movie. Well, no, there might be car chases in a great movie, but that's not what makes it a great movie. Just as there might be things in great copy that you could say, oh, that's what makes it fantastic. That's what makes that piece of copy work. And you say, well, no, because the idea is different. What's really going on? This is a bigger story or a bigger idea or a bigger concept, and you're missing that point. So I think you do have to detrain people. And so actually, I'm undecided in my mind as to whether or not it's better to take someone with a few years experience and try and break them down and then build them back up again, or whether or not it's better to just find somebody with a natural flair but no experience and just build them up from scratch. Because lots of the people I know in the industry are part of that second group. I was one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure I had a natural flair for it, but I didn't have any bad copywriting experience when I started, and I started learning from some of the best people, and I had a real need and desire to make it work. So I didn't have any preconceptions about how it should work. I just wanted to find the things that did work. The one thing I want to say about a lot of the people who are just missing the mark completely is they focus on content without understanding the context. They don't understand the environment, the circumstances, and the interrelationship of pieces, and certainly the big idea and the ability to deliver a compelling message credibly. Well, let's talk about FCU some more. That's why you're here. I appreciate you taking that side trip with me. Um, is it crazy to try and train people for free for 12 weeks?
Probably. But sometimes crazy works. So so I actually wanted to charge a little bit of money. I wanted to say, oh, you got to pay $100 or something to show that you were serious about learning what we had
Hmm.
to teach you. Because there was people on social media that accused us of, the fact that it's free. Really, it was some secret unpaid internship program, which is just the most insane way of thinking about it. I mean, it's if you have lots of brilliant copywriters on your team already and you want to grow it,
Well,
I don't know
let
why.
me say in their defense of their ignorance. There's a lot of businesses and probably a lot of ad agencies who do exactly that. You know, they'll say we'll
That's
give you a
true.
free training, and then they're looking for unpaid interns. I understand that's not what you're doing, but it's common enough so someone who didn't bother to find out what you're really doing would say that.
Yes, that's true. I suppose it's my own naivety of saying, well, I would never ask somebody to work for me for free. But I actually originally wanted to charge money for it, probably just a small amount, but to see whether somebody was really serious about it. And the guy, Brett Aiken, the publisher, one of the publishers over at Marketwise, said, no, don't do that. I don't want there to be any barrier. We don't want to miss talent because they don't have the money or they don't want to spend the money on the training. So that's why we made it free, although we probably could have charged an awful lot of money if we had that business model. Um, I've observed in the past, I've run copywriting boot camps in the past when I was a publisher. I think I've run 3 over the years. They were always 2 weeks long. And I observed that if I ranked the people in terms of who I thought was the strongest and the weakest on day 1 of the boot camp, and then looked at who I, did that same ranking on day 10, so 2 weeks, 2 working weeks, it was almost always completely different. That is to say, prolonged exposure and prolonged period of development allowed a completely different sort of cohort of talent to emerge. So I kind of took that approach here and said, well, we can do this remotely. Our goal is to find the best people possible. We should extend the amount of time we train and train these people and spend with them as long as we possibly can to allow for somebody to go on that journey to develop. How much progress can somebody make? Because actually, the person I'm interested in isn't the person who's brilliant. Or to say, okay, if they're brilliant, I am interested in them. If on day 1 they're at a reasonably high level, and at the end of 12 weeks they're at that same reasonably high level, you've learnt that that person is reasonably good but isn't developing, isn't improving at this point in time, isn't getting better. It's actually much harder to work with people like that. I'm interested in finding that person that's maybe at a lower level when they start, maybe at a much lower level when they start, but has made that sort of exponential leap. Because if I'm Marketwise, I'm thinking that's the person I want in my business because we get all of that upside, all of that progress as they develop. So I think it's that's the 12-week element, spending enough time for people to really develop, to really progress.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. I've seen the same thing in writers all the time. Um, it's it's kind of like when you peak too early, or you're just bathed with compliments. Then when a challenge comes up, maybe you're not resilient enough or tough enough, or even mentally prepared enough to do something. Um, I'd like to banty or badminton about a little bit about charging people. I think that when you're selling something, buyers are buyers and triers are triers. If you've got someone who's paid you $1, they're infinitely, not infinitely, but a large number of times more likely to buy when you make them a more pricey offer. What I have found in mentoring people for over 20 years and looking at the careers of my friends who were, became world-class famous copywriters is there's only one factor I've found that they all have in common. And I think this would probably tie in with a person who isn't already at a high level and a little full of themselves. And that factor is desire. When somebody wants it, and they're like a dog going after a bone, they're willing to learn and they're grateful to learn and they look forward to learning and they have a very growth mindset. So I just want to toss that out there and see if that resonates at all.
I think that's very true. And obviously that personality and that desire, that might take time to come out. I mean, if you think of, because the real driving factor in a copywriter's success in our industry, I think, is we've all been mentored by someone or by multiple people. You can read all the books you like, but ultimately that jump tends to come in a solid mentoring relationship where someone can say to you, that's not right, you need to start again, or that's great, or develop this, or, give you some real home truths sometime. And, you've mentored lots of people. Can you mentor somebody? Can you work with somebody for a week and genuinely say you've improved them? Probably. But if you expand that out to 12 weeks, your chances of success or of a genuinely solid assessment of where they are, I think they increase. So, I mean, that's what, so to answer your original question, I think it probably is crazy to train people for 12 weeks, but I also think it happens to be the format which allows me to fulfill the mission I've been given, which is to find the best potential copywriters that are out there right now. And that
right, because you don't have a meat grinder where you're saying, okay, at the end of 12 weeks, out comes a finished copywriter. You're saying, okay, at the end of 12 weeks, here's a person who is much more likely to succeed and much more prepared to succeed than they were 12 weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that, the likeliness of success, I think that's a really important point. So I was when I worked when I ran the business in London, I remember running a copy camp, and somebody on day one described Agora as like the Valhalla of copywriting, which I thought was very funny.
Yeah.
And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, from my point of view, right, from the inside, I could see that the vast, more than half of the copywriters that we took on didn't succeed. And then even of the ones that succeeded, most of their year was spent writing copy that didn't work. The failure rate at every stage was extremely high. I think people had this idea that inside the business, everything everyone touched just turned to gold and we just had this secret, and we didn't. What we were good at and what we are good at in our industry is finding those ideas that have that huge amount of value, that mean you can have 4 failures and then 1 massive hit, and that can make or break your year, make or break your entire business. We're great at that. But that's that's very different to the Valhalla metaphor.
It's so different from almost anything else. I mean, again, we're not in show business, but there are similarities. Actors go through how many auditions before they get hired? Then they get hired and they're making a movie. Then they go through how many takes before they get a good one. And I think part of success in copywriting, and probably in the film business as an actor, maybe as a writer, is to really give it your best shot and come up with something that's high quality and still fail and go, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something different, or let's see if we can adjust it. A lot of people who aren't in this, really aren't in the dynamic, in the heat of it, they don't understand that. They think, well, if I do a good job, I should get a pat in the back and a trophy for participating and money and a job and an award. They don't understand. we are failing with very high quality tries.
Yeah, I think that's actually the part of our industry that's the closest to art, right? It's you got to be part poet, part killer in the industry, as I think it was Ogilvy said
Yeah,
that.
that's
Um,
right.
and it's the artistic part is the part that you're talking about. The magic, like what makes a blockbuster? Blockbuster novel, film, promotion. It's not scientific. You can stack the deck in your favor, but you can do all of the right things, tick all of the right boxes, and write extremely high quality copy, and it just missed the mark because on some level it has to appeal to, it has to have mass emotional appeal, and that cannot be modeled and that cannot be understood scientifically. It can only be understood as a sort of social scientist might or as an artist might. Okay, once you have a successful piece of copy and the industry then becomes a science, how do you maximize it and how do you scale it and how do you monetize it and all of those things? So there is a massive scientific part, but I think people struggle with that. It's like, oh, we all thought it was great. And it's like, yeah, we all thought it was great. And it went out into the world and it was a big fat bomb. Now wake up tomorrow and do it all again. It takes this special sort of person to deal with that, I guess, and we're trying to uncover those people. I mean, that's our job, isn't it? That what I just described. That's what we do.
Yeah, that is. So you're talking about in the industry and in the career, but let's narrow it down to just the application process. I mean,
Yep.
what made the difference between the applications that you even considered as well as eventually chose and those that didn't make it?
So I asked just for a 500-word letter convincing me why you should have a place, and then one copywriting sample if you wanted to submit one. The reason that was optional is because I got a job doing this straight out of college. I didn't have a book. I didn't have any copywriting samples, so I didn't want to choose based on people's book effectively. And I gave people quite a lot of guidance on how to go about that task. And I think this is where it comes down to either the core skills of copywriting or the core instincts that make a good copywriter. The people that stood out did all of the things that we know make a piece of copy great. They told a story. They created a pattern disrupt with a kind of strange statement. They did something a bit odd. They put a picture on. One person posted a picture of I have a standing desk, and they posted a picture of me, and the first opening line just said, "Nick, do you just stand there all day?" ... And then there was a picture of me. Just something could be as simple as that, but that's copywriting, isn't it? You know who your audience is, and you've just got me to go. In my head, I said, yeah. But okay, that's 50% of our job. Okay, yeah, sort of started that conversation. So it just came down to the basics of copywriting, and the reject pile was the reverse of that. The same things we know make lots of copy fail. Talking boringly about yourself and your biography. As I know that those things are interesting in an application, I suppose. But, I got 150 applications and at least half of them started with either I've always loved writing or I will work really hard if things like that, which I respect. I don't dismiss those people and think you're wrong. I just think that's not copywriting. You haven't.
Do you know Joe Schriefer?
A little bit, yes. Yeah, we move in the same circles, as it were.
Yeah. So when I was consulting, I consulted to Agora Financial for 5 years as a copy consultant. And I remember once I was in Baltimore and one of the younger copywriters had an idea and it was kind of half baked. And Joe was very polite about it. He told us why it wouldn't work and why it would work. And then later, someone told me something really fascinating, which I think applies to your applications too. So I don't know if this is true at every Agora division, but at Agora Financial, writers were supposed to pitch Joe, I guess, send him a lead and maybe a headline complex. And the advice was don't describe it conceptually. Get him as excited with what he's reading as you want the reader to be when they read your copy. Because that's what a copywriter does. A copywriter finds an intriguing way to get your attention and build your curiosity and hopefully get you to have enough desire or enough fear or enough some emotion to take action. And so if you can't actually demonstrate it, then your chances of being able to do it are just perforce less, even though you might be great at it. If you sort of go into that job application 9 to 5 bureaucratic departmental corporate mentality, you're screwed.
Yeah, it's a shame because it does show you how there's the gulf between often the gulf between theory and practice, because lots of people, not half, maybe 25% of people, open with something along the lines of maybe it's not the first line, but the lead will say something like, I've read all of the copywriting greats and I've joined this group and that group and what have you. And that's all very interesting and shows that you take it seriously. But unfortunately, how I interpret that is, and you've learnt absolutely nothing from that process, because when tasked with a piece of copywriting, you just vomited your biography at me. And now there's nothing wrong with doing that. I don't want to come across like I judge those people as like you're like judging their character. But I judge the writing and I say, well, there's nothing here that is really of interest to me yet. Whereas, I'll give you an example of. By the way, one of the things I do is I read all the applications one day. I think I read half of them. Glenn read the other half, and so I read my half. And the next morning, I just woke up and thought, which ones can I still remember? Like, which is just doesn't like just what have I still retained? Because I just think that must be something. And so the ones that I can still remember now, I would rank as the best. But one of them said, I think the opening line said something like on September 11th, 2001, I stood outside the Pentagon and watched a plane fly into the building. That was the opening line. And this is somebody with a background in government. That's interesting. That's copywriting, right? Really? Wow. I wonder what. So you read the next line, and then that one subsequently had, I've worked with this group. I've read all these books. There's absolutely nothing wrong with referring to your efforts and your the investments you've made in your own skill. I massively respect that. But what that shows me is and you've taken on board what those experts had to say. I can see you have, because I'm halfway down the page now. That for me is like, okay, this person's got something. I actually love it when somebody really grabs my attention and then says, I've never read anything about copywriting, because then I think, well, this is raw talent, isn't it? Who knows what this person can do with some instruction?
Yeah. So I've completely lost track of time because of all our technical difficulties, but I assume we still have a little more.
We do.
Okay. Yes. So what are you teaching the students in these 12 weeks?
Okay, so largely what you would expect. I mean, you've mentored people for a long time, so heavy focus on headlines and leads, on that opening goal, that opening, first couple of pages. The idea is by the end of the 12 weeks, they will have produced 3 headlines and leads. We're doing it in 3-week cycles. Mm-hmm. But actually the beginning, we just started the coaching this week. And I've said to everyone, I don't want anyone to really write any copy for the first couple of weeks, because actually, back to your point about Joe Schriefer, what I want to begin with is everybody to be able to just explain verbally what their idea is and why it excites them. Because I have this theory that if you can't do that, why on earth would you be able to somehow write it? And you've probably experienced this a lot yourself in copy reviews. Often you read a piece of copy and it's okay, maybe it's a bit muddled or whatever, and you stop the writer and you say, just forget the copy for a second. Just what is this all about? What's the idea here? And they can't answer you. They go, oh, it's kind of about Texas and there's China and obviously Germany are moving in. And they sort of talk like that, and you're like, how on earth, you can't verbalize it yet. You can't articulate it to me yet. So you're not ready to write. And I consider that to be like the foundation on which your copy's built. So I'm trying to ingrain that from the outset.
That's really good. And it reminds me of other people who are a little better prepared, but they get all caught up in this write-o-matic
Yes,
mode. And I say, so what's this really about? And they say, oh, well, it's about, and they spit out like a perfect headline and a perfect lead, just explaining it to
exactly.
me. Say, that's what you should be doing, but people kind of, my approach is copy's a conversation. It's a very excited, um, structured, persuasive conversation, but it should be conversational, not bombastic or formal or too logical or anything. It should have some logic, macro structure, but it needs to breathe like a real human conversation.
Yeah, I think all of those, the logical structure and the other elements that you alluded to there, those parts are easier to teach. They do take time, but you can teach somebody to organize an argument, and you can teach
Yeah.
somebody to, delete their passive sentences and stuff. But it's much harder to teach somebody to come up with a great idea. And I don't know about
Oh
you, but
yeah.
the best copy I've written over the course of my career, I've always been able to. My wife says to me, "What are you working on at the moment?" I've always been able to just tell her quickly, and although she's got no interest in financial copyright, she'll be like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." Like she'll get it, and it just sounds like, and it's not. I won't say the headline to her. I'll just be like, "Oh, I'm writing about why Elon Musk is like really joined Donald Trump's government because he's got this whole master plan. It's to do with AI." She'd be like, "Oh." I'm like, okay, that's a good sign, right? Because although I have to put some copywriting elements together on it, I'm able to express it simply. And when expressed simply, somebody else is like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's interesting. So I'm trying to teach that first. Because if you don't have that, you've got nothing.
I think that's amazing. I've never heard of anyone trying to teach that first, or who can teach that. And I think as you're successful, you'll have come up with something unique that a lot of people need. I have a running conversation with myself, of ongoing exploration, that getting to something simple is a process of elimination of a lot of complicated pieces, and there's no shortcut. It takes a
Oh,
while. It takes effort, and it takes um, deselection. It's like, Chinese Russian dolls, or I forget, where you have one inside another, and you just have to keep peeling layers. Um, and
absolutely.
because
Like we
because the
call it,
simple, yeah.
sorry, I interrupted you. We call it select and amplify. You have to keep choosing the part that you like and then blowing it up again, and then it gets too big and select the part that you like and then
Oh, I
blow it
like
up
that.
again. Amplify, select and amplify. That's the process we go through in our brains. Really, as a mentor, you're just watching someone go through it. Okay, what if you eliminated all the stuff about China and just made it about this? Okay, now let's get rid of all of the. Let's just get it down to its purest elements, and it is hard to do. But I think if you can do that, yeah, you at least have a foundation. And just to maybe to call back to what I said earlier, I don't think lots of that's too conceptual to write down in a book. Maybe not. But not many writers out there who are trying to learn to break into our industry think like that. They all jump to trying to come up with a clever phrase in a headline, and they skip that step. And that's what when I said detraining people, that's really what I meant. Let's get this part right. Let's get you able to just explain it. Then we'll put the bells and whistles on, and you can go nuts once you start writing.
Well, the process isn't sexy, so it's not
No,
going to get like a lot of widespread. Um, it's not like a one-legged golfer, or a nerd from Ohio or something like that. It's complicated, and but the result is very sexy. I mean, even before the money it makes, some of the ideas that come out are really cool. But, finding out how to get there, I guess it's just not widely known.
Yeah, I think this is something I've had to reconcile myself with about myself, in that perhaps my way of thinking about the world is, and thinking about copywriting, I think it's useful to a small group of people, and I think those people will get to the top of the industry, or go far. But I also don't think my strategies and approach and whatever has like mass market copywriting appeal. Nobody wants to hear a book about that. They're, like you say, there are far more interesting and far simpler ideas. But maybe that
No,
goes back to doing
well,
this. That's why they chose
well,
us.
yeah. I mean, the process itself is it's for the select few, but the results of the process and describing not how they got there, but what's great about them, a lot of people would be interested in that. You know,
True. Well,
well,
maybe years time I'll be, sitting on a beach somewhere and writing a book about it. But for now, I'm in the trenches with 12 beginners and trying to say it again, explain your idea to me again.
no, that's great. It sounds like Socratic method for the 21st century. Well, so what happens to all of the people who didn't make the cut? And the whole concept is it going to be 12 people and then you're on to something else, or what's going on?
I mean, I think to an extent it depends on how good a job we do. If we deliver 12 appalling candidates to Marketwise at the end, I'll probably say, you don't need to do that again. But all things being equal and everything going to plan, we intend to try and do another one next year. Some of the people who applied, we didn't just write back to them and say, you're not in. We wrote back and said, stay in touch, keep developing, keep learning. You might just need a bit more time. And I hope to do another one next year. I know that Marketwise's goal, this is me speaking as somebody that writes for the business. We have brilliant editors, we have so many talented staff, we have brilliant copywriters. We want to be in a position where anyone who's up and coming with the talent required to get to the top is part of our ecosystem, so that we can train them up and our business can benefit from them. So I hope it's going to be an ongoing thing. So and we've left the waiting.
Good. Okay. Not to be too much of a waggy finger scolder, but next year, if you do it, could you let us know a few weeks earlier than you did, so we'll have enough time?
I intend, one of the things this year was, hey, we want to do this at school and we want to get things moving really fast. So we kind of had a month to publicize it. I want to have at least a 3-month lead time next year. And you'll be the first people. Yeah.
Just a bunch of gold in this week's episode. I think that a lot of the stuff that you talked about today was a little bit more high level than the stuff that we usually touch on in the podcast. But for copywriters that are either trying to break in or take their skills to the next level, both types of copywriters can gain from this discussion today. So I appreciate both of you coming on to talk about this today. And Nick, where can people go if they want to find out more, or maybe stay in touch, be notified of next year when you do this again, potentially? Where's the best place for people to go?
So it's really simple. You just go to our website, which is financialcopyu, the letter U, not the word, .com. All of the details are there, and you can sign up. It's worth signing up and joining the waiting list. You get, there's a video from me and there's letters from Glenn to keep you in the loop. And so we'll update people on how this course goes. And, hopefully each class gets better than the last one, because we're learning and tweaking, and we're better able to accelerate people along that path. So if you're interested, it's definitely worth checking it out now, even if you can't really apply properly until next year.
Awesome. And we will make sure to have that link in the show notes over at copywriterspodcast.com. So if you want a quick way to get there, copywriterspodcast.com. And until next time, we will catch you later.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Catch you later.